All right, cool. And let's get started.
Sure.
My name is Casey, and I'm going to be interviewing you, Rania, about your new book, The Jinn Daughter. And I was wondering if you would like to introduce yourself to people who may be watching.
Yeah, so I'm Rania Hanna. I'm the author of The Jinn Daughter. I'm not really sure what to mention. I'm a neuroscience grad student right now, so I've been doing a lot of research apart from all the work I've been writing. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what else to share.
Cool, yeah, that's great. I think then I would love to congratulate you on having your debut novel published. What's it
Thank
like to be
you.
a first-time author? And of course, and how does it feel to have your first book being read by others?
It's actually a little nerve-wracking. I don't know how people are going to respond to it. Whenever you write, I think especially your first book, you put a lot of your soul into it. And so it's exciting, of course, it's exhilarating. I'm very excited, I'm very happy to, finally get it out there. But there's also this element of, oh, what if people don't like it? Or, what if it doesn't resonate with readers? What's going to happen there? So there's a lot of concern and worry, but there's a lot of exhilaration as well.
Cool. And in honor of this big milestone, when did your passion for writing start? And have you always wanted to publish a novel?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I've been writing since like third grade, if not earlier. I started out actually my third grade teacher, wonderful, wonderful teacher. He was just very supportive of all his students, but he was, I think, especially supportive of me, like being kind of curious. I was a very curious kid. And so I would write things I was interested in. So like at one point I was going through this like ancient Egyptian mummification process phase. So I was like writing an essay about that from like books in our school library. I was fascinated by dinosaurs. So I was writing essays on that. And I was like just giving it to him because I was bored and just wanted to share it with someone. And he would actually read it. So my first like unofficial published book was this collection of essays I'd written that he went to Staples and like asked me what my favorite color was, asked me my favorite animal, and I said, well, pink and bunny. And so he actually made this like spiral bound book of my essays with a pink cover with a white bunny on it. So he was very kind, and so I really got a lot of encouragement writing and researching when I was younger that kind of just continued on my life.
Wow, what an incredible backstory to you getting into writing. That kind of brings me to my next question. How has your background in neuroscience influenced your approach to writing The Jinn Daughter?
I've gotten that question before, and I'm not really sure, in the sense of course, it requires a lot of, I wouldn't even say it's neuroscience per se. I think it's just research in general. Like when you're writing a book, even if it's fantasy, it's fiction, there's a lot of methodology to it, right? Like whether you're outlining, whether you're a discovery writer, there's a lot of thought that goes into it, a lot of rationale, because of course the plot has to make sense, the magic or the world has to be consistent. So there's a lot of the scientific thinking that kind of goes into writing. So there's this idea of researching what you need to know if you're doing research. There's the idea of making sure things are making sense or methodical, even in science, even in research. Like right now, I'm working on this publication based on research I did. There's a lot of storytelling in that. So it actually goes both ways. It's not like, science informs the fantasy. It's actually there's skills that kind of collaborate with each other. And so, a lot of it is telling a story, but also knowing what to tell and what amount and when. And so there's a lot of crosstalk there, I think, between the two worlds.
Sure. And with that construction of the world, was it's very dark, the world and the themes and the images. And it feels very adult, like an adult folktale. Was it always intended for YA audiences, or did it shift away from being like a more adult story?
I would say I was considering YA. I actually, at one point, I think I was going to focus on the daughter in the book, not in Nadine, the mother.
Okay.
And so it was going to be YA with like, a teenager dealing with the realm of death and the goddess of death. And it once I started writing, I'm a discovery writer, so like I don't know what's going to happen when I write at all. And so the story kind of developed around Nadine. Like she really became the voice of the story. So I just kind of went along with that because I felt like it was her story that I was telling, not Leia. I think if I ever write a sequel, it would certainly be Leia, the daughter, who I would focus on. And I think that would be more YA, but it just kind of worked out that way.
Oh, interesting. That was my next question. I was wondering when Nadine's perspective became the center of the story. Uh, what can you tell me about the world building and creation of these really complex characters, and how did you develop that, like the mechanics of the magic used by the main character?
I can't really speak to how I developed it. It just kind of developed on its own as I was writing. Again, very discovery writer. So I wasn't really necessarily thinking about the mechanics as I was writing. They kind of just unfolded as the story moved along. In terms of the world, I really wanted a woody setting though. That was like the main thing. I really wanted it to be woodsy because I feel like that's such a folkloric setting. It's such a quintessential folktale setting that I think really, like you're saying, it's a little darker. And that's what I wanted. I absolutely wanted the theme to be darker. It's death. I didn't want this to be like, a happy story. And a part of it too is the story is about grief, right? So it's going to be a little darker. Um, and so I think the world really just developed out of those core requisites, I guess you can say. And then, it's very Middle Eastern. So I pulled a lot from Middle Eastern folklore, from, our sort of, Middle Eastern mythology, which is where the Jinn stuff, the Jinn magic comes in. And so there's a lot there that's just kind of pulled from, the tales I grew up with and kind of the different elements there.
Right. And I read in an interview about how the oral tradition of storytelling has really influenced your storytelling. How did that affect the way you wrote the book? Because it's so lyrical and it sings in such an interesting way. How did that oral tradition influence your style?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the folkloric aspect was a huge part of it. Absolutely, I say I'm a discovery writer, but I did have the goal of adding these like folkloric, like 1001 Nights, like smaller tales woven into the larger narrative. That was very important to me. I grew up with my dad's storytelling. Like he didn't read to me, he told me stories, right? He's very much an oral storyteller. Our Middle Eastern heritage is very oral storytelling. Like in Syria, there's a cafe in Damascus. It's like I think the oldest coffee house in Damascus or something. And mind you, Damascus is like the oldest capital city in the world still inhabited, right? And they actually do storytelling, oral storytelling. So like you have the Hakawati, the storytellers, like these old men, like go to the cafe and they have just coffee and they tell tales. And so I really wanted that feel to kind of come in where there's a lot of the imagery of folktale of Middle Eastern storytelling kind of woven in there into the larger narrative and kind of this feel that this is like a fairy tale and a fairy tale does have a certain cadence. I drew a lot of like the lyrical aspects from like Bear and the Nightingale. If you've read, like beautiful book. I mean, the writing is just beautiful. And so I kind of wanted to emulate that. And I hope I did. It's such beautiful writing. I mean, that entire series is just wonderfully written. Um, and so I kind of wanted it to sound like that, kind of sound a little more musical. So
And it does. It totally strikes that balance between like
oh,
the modern
good.
story and the feeling like you're being told a story from a long time ago. I
Good. Thank you.
think that leads me to ask about the characters, who I think are central to what makes this story work. While it's magical and fantastical, the characters and the relationships are very real. Um, Especially the mother figures like Death and Nadine. Um,
Mhm.
did you include any parts of your own personality in these characters, and who was your favorite to read?
Yeah, I think I want to say Nadine and Layala are both like elements of me in there. I think Layala is like my younger me, my teenage self that had something to prove. I don't know what that was, but I had something to prove to the world. And I feel like Layala kind of um, has that in her. And Nadine, I think, is like my older current self, where I'm a little more thoughtful about things, I think, but you know, I'm still very emotional in a sense where, you know, there's a lot always swirling in my mind. And I think most people are like that. And so Nadine and the Yala, I think, are kind of mixes of me at different ages, but they're also their own people, like they're their own character. I will say though, the not so much the specifics of their relationship, but kind of like the feel between like the back and forth between them, I think is kind of like the relationship I had with my own mother growing up, where there's, you know, a lot of growth between us that we both had to do in our relationship. And like as you move forward in life, the relationship kind of matures. And that's kind of the feel I was going for there. In terms of my favorite character to write, I would say Gamuna, Death, because she's the goddess of death. I mean, how fun is that? Absolutely love her character. I think she I love writing dark characters. I love kind of going into that a little bit, but also making sure they're kind of humanized and they're not just this trope of darkness, that they're also people. So she was really fun to kind of try to strike that balance. And then I would say Elias, the husband, lover, father, just because his situation is a little unique. Like he's not quite in life, he's not quite in death, he's in a purgatory of some sense. So his relationship with the physical and the spiritual world are a little more complex. So that was interesting to kind of figure out how, I mean, you can tell, I think, I hope, he's just kind of accepted his fate at this point. So he just kind of goes with the flow. He knows he has no power really, apart from like trying to provide emotional comfort to the other characters. But he's also based like on a mix of traits of my husband and my dad. So he was really kind of fun to build. And I didn't really intend for that. It just kind of happened. So he was kind of fun to explore as well, just from that perspective.
Totally, yeah. I think Ilias is really interesting, and also I think the Sheik is one of the
Oh,
most
yeah.
interestingly like interesting, really written characters I've ever read. Somebody who is so full of hate and also love for their granddaughter was really incredible. Um, what was your what were some of the like folkloric inspirations for some of these characters like the Sheik?
Yeah, the Sheikh, the Sheikh, Sheikh Hamadi.
Thank you.
I really just wanted a character who was the villain in a sense, who definitely the antagonist, who also had, I wanted to make sure he had one redeeming quality, and that's his love for his granddaughter. So with him, it was I don't know, I don't feel like I put quite as much thought into him, to be honest.
Sure.
I feel like he kind of just developed and he was the necessary villain for the story. But I did want to make sure that he did have not just a redeeming quality, but a redeeming action, which he does sacrifice something major in the novel for his granddaughter. And I really wanted to make sure that he had that there, because I think it's important that like he's not just, you know, a villain and like that's it. I wanted him to have a little more depth than that.
Totally, and I think that was successful.
Thank you.
Uh, and I just wanted to wrap up here and ask you what about what you're currently working on. Will the Jinn Daughter have a sequel? I'm crossing my fingers that it will.
It might. I have some ideas. It would definitely focus on Leala and Seal because they're both in death and they're both now, you know, doing their thing in death. So I do want to focus a little bit on their relationship. I'm not sure how that will go yet. I have some ideas. Nadine will probably be a little more secondary to the story, I think. I do want to focus on Leala and her story. Elias probably will come forth a little more forward. I'm not sure yet. So I do have some ideas there, but no guarantees. What I am currently working on, I'm in the process of editing. It's a kind of a similar feel, so kind of like that folkloric writing, and you know, like the same template of like folk tales in a larger narrative. So I'm working on something new that's more based on like Arabian star folklore. So you know, constellations, you think Roman Greek, but like no, actually we like every culture has their own star folklore. But Arabs have a really strong tradition, especially like the Bedouin in the desert, like use the stars to navigate. So They have a lot of stories with different constellations that I really want to bring forward. So I've been working on that. And this one is more of like a father-daughter relationship, who the daughter has to save the father from this like ancient god. And there's a lot of star folklore in there that like kind of, builds the backstory a little bit. And there's a lot of like family dynamics and family tensions. And there's a lot of, again, this, idea of grief and loss and acceptance as well in the story. So I think if you like Jinn Daughter, you'll probably like this because it's very similar in theme and in writing style.
Okay, cool. I'm stoked. I cannot wait for that.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. The Jinn Daughter comes out April 24th, 2024,
The second, actually.
22nd.
Second.
Oh my goodness, I got my
Yeah, right in the beginning of April. Yeah.
April 2nd. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for your time. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to read what else comes out next.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Have a good day. Bye.
You too.